Hi Anna, you did a nice job overall with your images and including just the photogram in there for some giggles, I think was also a nice thing to do. Starting with a photogram, you see that they turned out kind of as undefined blobs for the most part. Certainly we get the kind of hint of a leaf here, maybe some flowers. We get the idea that these might be flowers, but there's certainly a lot that would be open to interpretation. And the difficulty that you face with your photogram is that you're working with things that have dimension. And for the best results for a photogram, you want them to be flat against the paper. Things that are flat against the paper are going to have nice crisp edges, and what we see is with the stem, it kind of represents that. This would have been flat against the paper, and so we don't really see much in the way of shadowing. However, with the flowers, the main part of the flower was off of the, well, maybe not even in the main part, but some of the flower was off from the surface of the paper, and so we see a lot of ghosting at the edges, and that's just kind of typical. Taking the time to flatten them, for example, you might use the old-time method of putting them between some wax paper and putting it in a book for weeks or whatever. Certainly that would be a way to achieve that. You mentioned using artificial flowers. Certainly that would work as well. You can get some very realistic looking shapes, and if it doesn't look like a real flower, it doesn't really matter, because once you convert that into that 2D platform, it's really not, nobody's going to know. Looking through your photographic prints, what I see is that your exposures are generally a little off, a little too dark. We see some areas that are very, very bright in some of these, and the rest of it are relatively dark. And what that tells me is that it was a relatively high contrast image to begin with. I'm not going to pretend that getting the negative right is a super easy step, because it's really not, and it takes some trial and error. The biggest thing to do is, the other thing is, you were using office products rather than fine art products. So using a negative material that is made for actual negatives rather than something that's made for an office presentation would help you get a little bit more detail. So there's certainly that. Certainly there's going to be a little bit of trial and error, and you learn that, okay, this is a little hot, and so we need to darken this up in the print. And there's a little bit of give and take, and of course the more you do, the better that you can kind of predict that. That said, here, the center of the flower, nice detail there. We see some nice veining here in the petals. All of those things turn out well. And we actually even see a little bit of the greenery behind the flower, and so that's nice as well. For this particular one, it looks like you had tried to cover the entire paper with chemistry, and there's a couple little areas that didn't get any. And so you definitely want to be careful about that. If you're going to include brush strokes like you did here, then you want it to be obvious. And if you have areas that are just missing a little bit, then it looks like it's unintentional. So you either want to be in every case you want to be intentional with your decisions. Be careful to cover the paper completely, or be careful to include brush strokes, one or the other. Here we see some nice detail between the petals. We don't see as much in the middle. So given the flower itself, relatively low contrast in terms of brightness. And so when you're looking at a flower, you often will see huge contrast because you have different colors. And so the petals might be one color, the center of the flower is going to be a completely different color, and it's going to look very obvious, and it's going to be easy to distinguish those. However, once you convert those to brightness values, that is the luminosity, then they kind of tend to merge with each other. And so that was the reason why, or that is a reason why you might use a black and white adjustment layer for doing that kind of edit. And it would allow you to change the relationships. And now obviously we just have shades of blue here, so we're not gonna see much. But you can use this before you generate your negative in order to get the contrast that you want. and that'll help this kind of image render a little nicer. Here again we see some nice detail here in the petals. We're starting to lose a little bit here in the middle. Maybe a little bit of fill flash could help with that. But overall, I think that this is a relatively successful image. Everybody can tell exactly what it is just by looking at it. Yet it has a little bit of mystery because the petals are a little bit wilted. The shape of the flower isn't nice and round, and so gives the viewer something to think about. And so that's generally a good thing. Overall, I think you're on the right track. A little bit of practice, as the case with anything, will help you to achieve even better prints. Let me know if you have any questions.